it turns out the pain point is that generally the mom that's running the household, the CEO of the household, has too much to do to sit down and say, let's do health today. She has a calendar and she goes to the doctors and she goes to the school lesson, then she goes to work, then in the lunch she might do something else, then she might go and be a homeroom mom, then she might go to scouts, then she might do something else. She uses her calendar. And so what I did was develop what they call a calendar that files itself. It uses natural language parsing to read the text in your calendar. So if I put in my calendar Ben's doctor, it reads it and auto-files it under Ben's doctor, and then APIs add the various information that you need. We have contact with Walgreens and some other companies like that. So the idea is to use your calendar and all your information consolidates and you can find it and search for it and do what you want. That's the pain that I'm solving for a parent. There's some other information on here about me. A couple of things that are interested is I studied, I'm one of the few people that's been certified in new product development processes. I don't know if you know anything about this. But we studied a lot the strategy around $1 billion company and what makes $1 billion company, and it was really interesting to understand the different perspectives. I mentioned before I've raised just under $5 million, so I'm one of the few women in technology to do this in the US. I think it's, 5 or 6% now, and then even fewer to do this in Pennsylvania, and all my money came from this region. I don't know if you understand how rare that is, but I'm quite proud of it anyway. I'm a Microsoft One company. I'm a Dell Founders Club entrepreneur. There was a movie about me that launched with George Clooney at Napa Valley. We were Web Summit Start 150 technology growth companies in the world for 2 years running. But I think most interesting for this particular class is in 2011, I was selected to be in Steve Blank's Lean Launch Lab project. I don't know if anybody knows this, with a CEO called Ben Mappen. He is like a maniac online 24/7. But that was a really interesting learning curve for me about the business model canvas, how you use it and how it works. So that was an interesting journey as well, an interesting part of my process. So does anyone have any questions about me on my background? I didn't, nobody gave me this on a plate. I learned everything that I'm going to teach you the hard way. So I promise I've earned my dues. Did you have a question?
So when you were trying to figure out what exactly you were going to work on, I'm sure you had several pain points when you had that experience.
Yeah.
So how did you narrow it down to the one that you wanted to?
Some of it was easy because it was my pain. So I'm solving my own pain. In SAP, they call it eat your own dog food. I think I like it more when they say you drink your own champagne. That kind of sounds nicer to me. So there was some of this that I understood it, but I probably did. I think it's a really good question because in this research phase, I probably did a year and a half worth of research in. So if you look at the lean methodology, I think you were taught that 2 classes ago. Is that right? Or 3 classes ago. So I did exactly what they said. I built a website. I put different marketing messaging on. I tried to see who would give me their email. We gave away those little iPods when it was an iPod, that you couldn't even play a TV. It just had music because I'm so old. But we did, month after month after month, we just did research and research. I wanted to stick a pen in my eye because to get to that messaging and to get to that pain point of how people understand what you're solving, it was really hard. And it was way harder than I thought because I understood it and I felt the pain myself. So because certain things put people off, but until you A/B test the wording or what the messaging is, you don't know what's putting them off. So it was way harder to do that piece of research because we're direct to consumer. I think if you're B2B, I think if you're selling to a corporation, you can go in and sit with somebody and they'll tell you. But consumers were just harder to get that kind of volume of feedback from them. But that's how I did it. And I interviewed people. I have an elite advisory board. I understood my own pain.
So when you were researching this, were you also working?
I was working. I stayed at SAP. I declared to SAP that I was doing a project, and they didn't. It's not competitive. Family management, so every night and every weekend I would do research, and we would work on a weekend building the sites. And there was a little tiny team. When I go back and look at what I've done, it was really horrible and embarrassing. But that's how we started. So I would say probably about a year. year to a year and a half is the amount of time that it took me, and some of that's because I was working as well. And I also, at the end, had to double contract back to kind of minimize my risk. If I left SAP when it started to take off, I also kind of had to double contract as well to earn enough money so that I could feed my family and pay my mortgage and things for what I thought would be a year or 2 years for it to take off. Yeah.
I do have a question. At which point did you raise funding in the process of?
I did everything myself with kind of free team people. That was your team and your founding team. That's a whole other experience. It's probably a different class. After we understood what we had to do, I decided I would try and learn how to raise investment, and that if I could get investment, then I would go the next step and it would be viable. So I think if there's any attorneys or accountants in the room, they should probably put their fingers in their ear, because I think what I did was probably illegal now. But I went out to and it's called a friends and family round. I didn't do that. It was more kind of colleagues and friends. Not that I know everybody's bank accounts or anything, but I kind of gut feel, can this person afford to lose this money? And I said, okay, you can invest between $2,500 minimum and $100,000 maximum. And I just asked everybody, and I put a presentation together that said, I think my company is just fantastic, it's worth so many million. It was like I did it on an Excel model. Oh, I think it's worth this much money. And then they invested, or they didn't. I raised around $700,000 or $800,000 from that round of just asking people. And most people put in between $5,000 and I would say $20,000, and that's how I built that up.
Did you start building the platform at that time, or no? It was just
I used that money to build a minimal viable product that we built on Ruby on Rails and Amazon, and we used some contractors to build that. Again, that's another journey that I went on. That's an interesting journey while I was still at SAP. And then what happened is I was selected to launch first on stage at Venture Beat Demo, and then I was filmed for this movie, and then all of a sudden it took off, and we had the traction that we needed to really raise what I would call serious venture capital money, or a Series A round. Any other questions? I am happy to take questions as we go through.
What did the people that were the early investors, what did they get from this investment?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So I think now I have to think back. I think I took so many millions worth of units of ownership. I had an LLC then. This is going back 3 years. It's hard for my brain. And what we did is we said, okay, we think the company's worth this. This is your investment. Therefore, you take this much of ownership. But when I actually got a Series A, we had to refactor into a corporation, and then the whole amount of units and options and stock was refactored. And then the hard thing for me is the original investors are just diluted with each round unless they keep upping their round. But that's how we did it. Yeah. And I know my attorney was, what did you do? But it felt, with the best understanding that I had, that's how I did it at the time. I would do things differently again. But yeah, that's what I did. Are there any more questions? I will tell you everything, honestly. I promise. Okay, so a business model describes how an organization creates, delivers, and captures values. So I mentioned this before, and I'm a big believer in this. No company can actually take off or even start without a well thought out business model. And it breaks your canvas. If you look on the wall, it breaks all the things that you need to think about into containable sizes. So having a business is overwhelming. What all this does is it simplifies it and breaks it into things that you need to think about and have like a mini to-do list to go off and validate. It really simplifies your to-do list for executing your model. The way it works is there's 9 different building blocks, and I'll talk about where this came from. It's a model that I was given and that I've used a lot. But there's 9 different building blocks that help you understand how your business makes money or how your business can become more profitable. And I do think there's a couple of things that's important. The first one is it doesn't replace your vision or your mission or your strategy. This is a model for your strategy. So it's just a template for your strategy. Or they call it in the book, I like this book, we did a competition with that. It's a really interesting book. I don't think it covers everything I needed for my business. There's kind of bits missing, but in general it's a good foundation. So they call this the blueprint for your strategy, which I like. But there's 4 reasons that businesses fail, and I think you should write these down because I think they're true based on all the companies that I saw fail. And I think you should think about these as you're doing your model and keep revisiting them to make sure you're not making this mistake. So the first one is the cost of acquisition is more than the lifetime value of a customer, which means it costs you more to get a new customer than you're going to bring in for their whole lifetime value. And so you need to understand this. A huge metric, especially in tech, is what's your cost of acquisition? How much does it cost? If you're acquiring 2,000 moms a day and it costs you $100 a day, that's a really high cost of acquisition. If it costs you 50 cents or 20 cents, that's much more viable for somebody that's looking at a model. And the lifetime value, don't just think, well, what's my lifetime value of a customer? Can I, what is that? Is this making a profit? Think about different ways when you're building your model to get that lifetime value earlier. So maybe you get your lifetime value in an upfront payment because they're going to take a discount for 2 years, for example. So really think, you might put your plan together and it might make a loss. We'll go back and think laterally about, are there different ways to look at this instead of just a classic, P&L way. You have the wrong team to execute. I can tell you from my personal experience that if you have somebody on your team in a leadership position, this is one piece of your puzzle. The other is you've got to be able to execute your to-do list and your plan. I can tell you if you have the wrong person in your team, even if just for 6 months, it can set you behind for a year or 2 years, or it can even nearly send you out of business. It is the talent that you have on your team. They're not your friends, they're your team. And it's so important to differentiate that, and it's so important to fire fast. And that I learned the hard way, and I now fire fast and respectfully, but it's a critical lessons learned for me. The other one is external forces that you haven't recognized. It could be regulatory compliance, it could be a competitor does something, or a company that you have done a deal with that doesn't come through on that deal. So I've had experience with that as well. Again, these types of things can take you out of business. So legally, you have to make sure you cross every T, dot every I, follow through. Even if you're sure that something's going to go well, I guarantee it doesn't. And the last one is the most interesting, is people don't really solve a pain that somebody cares about. So that your idea, nobody cares about solving that pain, or it doesn't make them feel better. And I'll talk in a second about solving a pain, because it doesn't have to be I'm solving a physical pain, like I couldn't find my health records. It could be an emotional pain, it could be there's other things that you need to solve for people. So there's lots of different business models that are available that you can go and follow. I did some research for this class just to see how many there were, and just the standards say there's more than 24 different business model types. I put some on here that are examples that you can start to look at. I don't know what your business models are, but I can tell you there's many different ones to look at. There's 3 on here, subscriptions, multi-site platforms, and licensing. Those are the 3 that are in my business. But I want to share a couple of things that are things I've learned about looking at your business models. So the first one is you need to think not just about your business model, but what's your end goal. So is your goal an IPO? Is your goal an exit? So my goal is to exit my company. I know what I want to exit, I think, roughly for. So you have to work backwards into your business model. Or is this a lifestyle business? So you might put a model together today and it might come out with $1 million in revenue, but that might not be enough to get you an exit in tech if you've had $20 million investment. So then you have to rethink your model. But $1 million might be great for a lifestyle business that you're running part-time and you want to stay at home. So you really have to understand what are the goals for your company and make sure you're working backwards into your model at the same time. And then the other things that I wrote down is I really did a lot of research, and I want to tell you some of the things I did because it might help you in doing your research. So I looked at other companies. So I looked very closely, for example, at the advertising business model. I thought, should I make money from advertising? So I spoke to my moms, my potential customers, and they said, we don't want to be advertised too. But I thought, it kind of feels like easy money. I think I want this easy money. This other stuff seems really hard. Advertising seems easy. I'm watching all these people do all this stuff. So I went to speak to some companies that have an advertising model, and I found it is not easy at all. And whereas it looks easy, what makes it look easy and why they're successful is the talent that they have on the team that can do the RFP bids, that has all the contacts, and to acquire talent like that is over $300,000 and 3 to 5% of your company. So if you have to look at when you're building this model, not just, this looks like a good idea, I can put advertising or clicks. You have to look, what does it cost me in talent to execute against this model as well? What is the cost to do this? Other things that I did is I looked at companies that I guess could be perceived as competitors, and I decided, okay, anybody that's a competitor, I will target them to partner with me. And so I called the CEO of a company from Life 360. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a big app that was to help you connect your families. And he spent hours with me. Like, he had no issues to share information about marketing, ramping numbers, what to do, branding. He was brilliant. But he took my call and helped me because he was another entrepreneur. And I did not know this guy. Randomly called him. I'd met him at an event. The third thing is I looked for companies that had closed down, and I called their CEOs and I asked them to coach me why their company had closed down. So I don't want to mention the name. Did you get your camera working? Yeah, so I don't want to mention the name right now. I can share afterwards. But I called the CEO of a company, very, very, very famous company that had closed down. And he spent 3 hours with me, and he took me through everything that was wrong with his model, why it had failed, what he did, what he would improve. And he's great now. He has a great job at another big company and is doing really well. But most people, if you call them, will ask you and help you understand your models and what's viable and what works. So just because a company doesn't exist anymore doesn't mean the IP and the knowledge is not there. And I would say, having him tell me what he did wrong and why it failed was a better learning experience than the others that were working well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The failure in him and what he shared with me helped me more than the companies that looked successful. And to do that, I think is incredible. So I have the utmost respect for him, but I think you just have to ask, and people will share this model information with you. I also, and I don't know, again, I can't tell you much more, but I also spoke to large corporations, you can imagine who they are, that were acquiring companies I thought were competitors, and I asked them as much as I could about the acquisition. Why are you buying them? What would you pay for them? What do their revenues have to be? How many people do they have? Why do you want to acquire this company? And I learned so many things about a model in there that I had to do that these companies were doing wrong, because I was listening to the people that were looking to acquire them. And then lastly, I spoke to some analysts. So McKinsey wrote some brilliant articles on my model, and I got an introduction to the person at McKinsey, and they spent 2 hours with me and explained their lessons learned around the model and the big company and how to make money. So those are the kinds of things I did over that kind of 1.5 to 2 years in research around these models. And I would say, don't be surprised how many people will help you, and sometimes the more senior, the more they help you if you can get in touch with them. That was a lesson learned.
One question.
Yeah.
What parts of open doors for you? Was it personal contacts, personal network, or?
So some of them I read about them online, and I reached out to them. Most of the time, I would say I either met them at an event, or I looked on LinkedIn and saw who I was connected with, and I asked them to introduce me if they knew them well enough. But most of the time, the people that helped me, the introduction came from someone else. But the company where he'd closed, it was a complete cold call. I emailed him and called him and tweeted him and stalked him, and I think he thought I was going to turn up at his house if he didn't help me. But that was a cold call. But most of the others are through, I try and work out who knows somebody and at least get some form of introduction. It's worked the best for prospects and for investors as well.
Thank you.
welcome.
Question. So going back, you said you should try and figure out your goal, whether it's to exit or to form an IPO.
Right, and some things change, life changes and things change, but just a rough idea of where you're going.
And how much does this, because if you, like in your case, do you have a list of top 5 people or companies that are likely to acquire your business, and how much does it influence your vision?
So it didn't influence my vision at all, but I knew to do the model from the research that I'd done. I knew to do the model that I'd done to build a platform in the way that I built it. It's very rare that there's only a few successful companies that it drives success, but it's hard to do. So I knew I had to raise venture capital. So you could kind of work backwards on a multiple of, if I take this much venture capital, I have to have an exit up here. That's how I did it. So there wasn't a lot of highly complicated math. It was more, if I want this exit and I take these terms, this is roughly what I would have to bring in. But it didn't affect ever affect my vision. My vision is, I don't want anybody to have the same thing happen to them that happened to me, ever. And I think that people should have access to their information, and it should be in a form that they use every day. So it didn't affect my vision, it just affected the different kind of paths that I went through my model to get to my vision.
Because ultimately you could think they could become your customer, they're going to acquire you and kind of...
And actually we've had a few people speak to us about an acquisition, and all of them were customers or prospects. Some were surprises and some were interesting for me. None of them I expected to approach about buying me.
How difficult was the transition from LLC to incorporation? And was it because you had to raise venture capital that you made that?
Yeah, I had to with the investors that I had, and it made more sense. It wasn't difficult at all. I have an attorney called Reed Smith. I don't know if you know them, they're in Philadelphia. And I don't know if I should say this because they might not like it, but they gave me a really good deal. Most attorneys, I think, in the startup place where I didn't pay for anything. They took the hit for the risk for everything until I started to be successful, and then I started to pay for things when I raised a Series A. I don't know. You probably should erase and rewind anything like saying that, but I'm sure many other companies. There's Morgan Lewis is big, I think, in Philadelphia, and there's a couple of others. I can't remember their names now that are really big, and I'm sure they do deals to help you when you're bootstrapping right at the beginning, as long as there's a long-term relationship there. But it was really easy. It didn't take long at all. Any other questions? No. So there's 9. So a couple of other things. The business model I found useful for talking to investors because I've already thought through what my business model is. It's easy for communication. And then there's 9 different segments or different blocks in there. There is partners, key activities, value prop, customer relationship, customer segments, revenue stream, distribution channel, and key resources and cost structure. The biggest thing behind this for my lessons learned is it's great because it gives you the things to think about that you need to understand. The challenge is it doesn't give you that viability model underneath or the financial model, and I feel like for me and everything I did that was missing because it was a big aha moment for me. So to be able to, as you're going through, put these numbers or stats, like this one customer segment, if you're a consumer, this could be your stat is I need to sell 100,000 of them because my market's this big or something. But you should be able to put a really simple model together that, what do you call it in Excel? It's kind of a variable. If I bring in 100 million customers, it's this. If I change the number to 50,000, it's this. That has your revenue and your costs, and see how viable this is for what you want to do. So we should be able to do that. I don't know if we can. I don't know how long it will take, but that for me was equally as important as this, and they don't really teach it together, at least not in the classes that I went to.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So what you're saying is this and the spreadsheet were never really joined in what you were reading?
There's some tools that came out maybe a year ago that kind of started to move in that direction, but when I was taught this, there was nothing. This is your kind of business model, but unless you start to put some math and some numbers and some market sizes and customers, you can't see if it's viable. And the viability is, can I generate cash? And so to me, it's really important that as we go through this and put your sticky note on there, that you have a financial piece with it at the same time. For me, I think that's very important. I had a lot of aha moments when I really had to say, what will this really cost? Really. Not in Joanne Land where I'm putting a model together that we make $1 billion a day. What will this really cost and what will this really bring in? And it really makes you think, what is my cost of acquisition when you have to put it in a model? And it's super simple to do, so it doesn't have to be complex. So to do it as you're going through seems to me like a logical step, whereas I did all mine in separate pieces, and I really wish I'd done them together because I would have got to a better answer faster. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my lessons learned.
Could I ask you another question?
Yeah.
Is this what made you decide to go to the platform? Because that's a big decision, like building that platform that everybody else integrates to.
It was the research that I did behind this and the understanding that I gained when I did the validation of it that helped me go to the platform.
So this validated it, right?
Yeah, so not necessarily my first version of my canvas, but as I'd gone through the minimal viable product and validated these different sections, when I looked at the customer segments and the revenue and the size of the model and the size of the market, it was a realization for me. And especially when I started to look at some of the really successful models, Facebook, Apple, and there's some others, but they were much more viable for the skill set that we had in my team at that particular time. So it was a plethora of different things, but it came from thinking about these topics and then validating them. But it wasn't an instant aha, it was an experience over time. Okay, so that's that. So the business model that we're using here is from this business model generation book that was in your reading. I don't know if anybody read it. I really like that. I like this. I like, there was, I think, a book called A Good Hard Kick in the Ass. It was just really a good book. And I love the book that Gabe did on traction. I don't know if you've read it. I really wish he'd written that book before I'd started. Every mistake or everything he did in that book I'd made. So I think Gabe owes me a coffee for making all his mistakes before he'd written his book. Or maybe wine would be better. So the business model canvas in the Excel is what we're going to try and do today. I know it won't be perfect, but let's get something out there so you can really start to work on it. When you don't have something immediate and put the first thing in, it's so easy to go in circles with this stuff, and it's much better to get something validate, say yes, no, and then move on. Validate, yes, no, move on. So sometimes it's better not to spend too much time analysing different things. The canvas, we're going to use this business model canvas with the Excel. It's easy to have discussions on strategy. It's easy to use a lean process and break everything down into a to-do list. And I found it useful for articulating my thoughts on my model to investors as well. So the model overlay looks as if the way you can see it on the screen. I don't know if who hasn't seen this before. So everybody's seen this before. Oh, you haven't?
No, I have seen this, but I'm curious, how mainstream is this model? Reading some of the articles, it feels like every person should have done this, but on the other hand, I've not heard of it like 2 months ago.
I don't know. Like I said, I heard of this because I followed Steve Blank and I was in the group that he did. And this group's a little bit separate, but I think they may have been taught by him somehow because they reference him a lot in their model. So I think it goes hand in hand with lean startup. I don't know how mainstream this is. I do know that for me, I would have done this, or I would have tried to do this anyway, but I wouldn't have done it with the pre-thought. Like, they're giving you pre-sections to think about, so it's kind of taking your blocks. So here's your overwhelming company that you've got to go and research and validate. What they're doing is just putting it into logical blocks to give you your to-do list. So I think just logically, I would have got to this in the end. I think this just kind of componentizes it and makes it easier to follow with your checklists and to get there faster. There's a few things that I do think are interesting. So like I mentioned before, it's like a canvas, a painter's canvas for your business. The right-hand side from value propositions onwards is like the front end of a stage where you're driving revenue. It's the piece that everybody sees, and then the 3, 4 on the left-hand side are the back end of the stage that drives the front end, and they cost you a lot of money. Or not sometimes not a lot, but they cost you. There's a cost associated to them. I think for today, it can be really confusing if you start going off down different models. So my company has consumer, and then we have corporate. Just pick one. Pick one. You should have post-it notes on your desk, and you should have pens. And just pick one colour, just focus on one. If you've got 3 or 5 or 2, do them on a completely separate canvas and then merge them together afterwards if you want to. But it's hard enough to do one. And I think if you start doing others, we'll be here until my flight leaves in the morning and we'll never finish. And then the next bit goes really, really fast, actually, just so you know. Actually building this is quite fast to do. You'll be pleasantly surprised, I think. Don't write on the canvas, use the post-it notes because you can use them again. Don't write too much detail. I would write like big essays on this little tiny post-it note. You're writing a big thick marker pen so you can only write a couple of words. The big one for me, I do think this is important, is when you write your post-it note, if you already know facts about that block, put a check mark in the corner. Yes, I know facts about this. This is factual. I know this. If you haven't done any validation and you don't have any facts, put a big question mark or a big X or something that you can visually look at this and say, out of my whole business, I can see that this is validated. I see that I know this, and these are all the things that I've got to do. You need to be able to look really quickly and see where you've got work to do and where you don't have work to do, especially if you're working in a team afterwards. Every building block is connected to another. It's a story, they're not a silo. If you put a sticker on there and you can't talk about it in a story or a flow, you've done the wrong kind of building block. We can talk about more about that. And then I think that's it. There's lots more rules, but those are the basic ones. The other thing I want you to think about, and I do think this is important, and this might not make sense now, but this is telling you what you could do. You have to work out, should you do it? And should you do it could mean, do you have the right team? Do you have the right capital? Do you have the right energy levels? So make sure you differentiate between what you physically can do versus the model that's telling you could do it. Does that make sense? Because I think a lot of people charge in, the model looks good, but they actually don't realize how difficult it is, or they don't have the team to do it. The team piece for me has been a big lesson learned. I just added this for fun. I don't even know if you can tell what this is, but we won a business model competition where you had to draw your business model on the back of a napkin. And our theme is a squirrel, protecting and preparing for the future in your wise old oak tree. So you put your acorns in your old oak tree and you protect and prepare your family. And so our business model, you can see our key resources were cloud technologies in the cloud. We had a cost pool that was draining all the money away. We thought it was really funny when we were drawing this. We had a revenue stream. Do you get it? Anyway, so I found this the other day when I was doing it. I thought, this is so funny to go back and look at what we did and who our customer segments were in our partnerships. But it was a kind of fun thing to do. Anyway, it brought back nice memories to me. Right, now we're going to build our model. Are you all ready? Do you have your post-it notes? Do you have your pens?
They're already here.
I don't know if you have an Excel model, you might want to open Excel and start to plug numbers in there. And again, you're not going to do it right, so just do it. I think you can procrastinate forever. My view now is just put it down, go with it, validate it, move forward. Because then as soon as you check it off, you don't have to think about it anymore. You can move on to the next thing. What do you want, sorry? On Excel, that's a good question. So I don't know who has Excel and who doesn't. I think for me, has anyone actually, you've said you've done a business model, has anyone else done a business model at all? You've done one too. Using this or a different technique?
This.
Using this? Oh, very cool. Online, did you use Strategizer or Lean Launch Lab?
I had a class on it, and we had to read that book. So.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Very cool.
I've used Lean Startup Machines validation canvas.
Oh, you did that? Uh-huh. So did you go to the weekend here with the startup leaders? That was a cool weekend, huh?
It was.
Did you do the one where Mernata came or a different one? Which one? Was it the last one or the one before?
I think
the last one. Oh, the last one?
The last one.
So it did some good things, don't you think?
Absolutely, real good.
Yeah. I tried the lean here.
which I guess is the same mostly, but they just, I guess, change it a little bit so they can brand it differently.
I'm sure it's much of a muchness. I think the main thing is to get your areas and get your to-dos and get on with it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if I could go back again 3 or 4 years and somebody told me you've got a kick-off for 45 minutes to get this done and then you've got 3 weeks, I would work like a maniac to validate through this. I would not do what I did where I was procrastinating around and looking at this. And before I even got to validate anything, I had like 5 million things documented. So I would just, I don't know what the right word is, just to do it, just put something down and validate it. I would just get on with it now. It's so easy not to get on with something when you're an entrepreneur. And I think this helps you say, right, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. Sometimes it doesn't matter which order. And so if I could go back in time, I would use my 2 or 3 weeks much more wisely to do something like this. I think I would have been more profitable faster.
So we have done a little bit of these in bits and pieces, for example, channels and value propositions.
That's cool.
Already. So how does that tie between this and what we've already done? Because we validated our assumptions and we've gone out and done.
I think you can just put your validated assumptions on here and put a check mark on it. And then I think the pieces that are missing, you'll see what's missing and you can work on those. And then I think when you've got check marks on everything, I don't know if you have check marks on everything, I doubt it because I don't on mine, but I think you can then, once you've check marked everything, you can go and look and use this model again to say, okay, how can I be more profitable? How can I look at this in a different way based on where my cost and revenue is? I don't know that I would go to the nth degree for that, but you can use this kind of philosophy of reevaluating, okay, what's my next innovation? How do I innovate this? How do I make this model more profitable?
One more question I had in mind. One is that in entrepreneurship, somebody says that build it and they will come.
Yeah, I don't think so. So my lessons learned. In fact, I built mine and then sat there with a screen and a clock. You know what's it called in those cowboy movies where that thing swirls around? Right. I don't know what it's called.
Tumbleweed.
Is that a tumbleweed? Yeah. We all sat there around a laptop. And it was just nobody came. Well, so that's not a good assumption.
Well, but that they don't mean, I'm assuming they don't mean that you just sit there and twiddle your thumbs, but it might mean that don't worry about the revenue stream.
I disagree.
Value proposition.
Yeah, I disagree completely. Right. I think there's only a few companies that have ever been successful without a well thought out business model and revenue stream, and there's a few of them, you've all probably heard of them, but there's probably 99.999% of companies that fail because they didn't have that look or that timing or something else. Your job as a founder and a CEO is to mitigate the risk, is to manage the risk, and the only way to manage risk is to manage all the different pieces of the plan that you've got and pre-think about these things. So I'm sure that there's a few successful companies that managed it that way, but I think they had other things that they might not talk about. In fact, I'm sure, I could guarantee you, they had things that they don't always tell the press that were going on in the background, or other things that they'd done before that failed that they didn't share. So I just would be a little bit careful, because what really happened is not always what the external perception. It's like looking at somebody's Facebook feed, right? You don't put, look how ugly I am today, and I'm throwing up, and my kids are naughty, I'm just horrible. You put, look how great I am, look at my makeup, look how fab my kids are. And so the external view that you see of these companies, you don't always see the things that happened before then. And then 5 years after or 3 years after, you meet them and you hear these things and you think, oh, that's not what I read in the press. So I think you just have to be careful about statements like that as well, about how many companies really that happens to. Really, that it happens to, not that other things happen to them first. But that's my lessons learned. But I think it's a good question. And I'd love, if you have your validated assumptions, I don't know if you want to share any, but I'd love for you to share your lessons learned as well. Just because I learned these things, if you have others, then if you want to share them too, I'd love that. I think you learn more when you're in an environment like this where you can share things and ask questions. So we're going to fill in our customer segment session first. Did you do customer segments already in yours?
Yeah.
A little bit?
We thought about who our customers are, and also we did. We did.
You did?
A lot of discussion around it.
So your customer segment are the people who you're solving their problem. So in my case, when it's a consumer, it's generally my audience is mom, and I'll talk about that in a second. So it's generally a woman in a certain age range. And then for my corporate sales, for my sponsorships, it's generally marketing people and then technology people when I license. But I want you to think about a couple of things when you think about your customers, and this is how I thought about things. You might have a different view, and I'm okay with that. So you need to think, who are your customers and what's your demographic? And so what we did is, in my office, we have a picture that has, and you can read different methodologies on this. I did not follow a best practice. We kind of made our own up. But we have a picture of a military mom, a pet owner, a caregiver, and then all around the edge is written, what job do they do every day? What do they need help with? How do they need help? Where do they shop? What do they look like? How much do they spend? What's their demographic? What's their geographic? And so all around the wall, we have those customer profiles or buying personas kind of around the wall with different details and information as we've learned that data. And there's all kinds of ways to do this. There's customers that are consumers, there's customers that buy direct from you, there's customers that buy through somebody else, there's corporations. This customer section in itself could be a whole day of how to validate your audience. My lessons learned from my customer is the Gen X demographic is the best demographic for me for many different. We started going after millennial moms. The Gen X turned out, when we were experimenting and validating, Gen X was the best market, so that's where we actually focus. All these others are fits for us, but we focus our marketing efforts. We don't turn away anybody, but we focus our efforts on Gen X right now. And we learned that through a series of validations and A/B testings and looking at our audience and who comes in and who uses the system. But the thing that I forgot to do, that I wish I'd done earlier, is when we were doing the NPDP certification, one of the things they taught you there was that people hire products to do a job, and they gave this example about buying a strawberry milkshake, and I thought it was the most ridiculous example. It's like, people don't buy a strawberry milkshake because they're thirsty or hungry, they buy it because they're bored on the way to work. But it wasn't his point. His point wasn't about the strawberry milkshake. His point was, you need to understand what jobs people do because they buy a service to replace those jobs. And so if you don't understand their job and their role, you can't sell them something that is important enough to replace that, if that's the space that you're in.
Could you say more about that?
Yeah, so there's so the way we were taught this, where people will buy, if you want people to spend money, so remember I made the comment much earlier in the session that companies fail because they're not solving a real pain point for somebody. And so when people want to buy something, it's because they're bringing in a service to make their life easier, or to make them feel emotionally better, or to make their perception better externally. So maybe you have some kind of makeup app that makes you look like a model and you post it on Facebook. But unless you understand what those jobs are or what those roles are, or which one is it you're going to fix for them that they would spend money on, it's really hard to drive success for them. It's really hard to message. Remember earlier when I said the most painful piece for me was the messaging? I wanted to stick a pen in my eye. And I think it's because I didn't understand what their jobs were, what they do. What does my mom do every day? She goes here, she does this, she schedules this, she picks up. I missed really important things because I didn't write this job down. So I'll give you a real example. So in my house, at that point in time, and still, I don't cook very much. So I don't think about recipes. Somebody else helps me with that. My husband helps me. He's a really good cook. I have lots of stories about him. So we didn't, on our persona, we didn't write down, I manage recipes, I manage food, I need to schedule them on my calendar. Just never, ever, ever crossed our mind. And then we launched the application, and maybe a year and a half later, we just kept getting these messages. why can't I manage recipes in my to-dos? Whenever to-do, I manage recipe. I go shopping, I buy food, I put my recipe on my calendar and I say, this food goes Monday, this food goes Tuesday, this food goes Wednesday. If I'd have sat down and instead of saying, okay, this is my buyer, this is where she shops, this is what she buys, if I'd have written a list of jobs underneath and brought in my early adopter customers and my real customers and written that list, I would have known that she writes recipes. And in my marketing, I would have been able to say, it's to-dos with recipes on your calendar. But I missed it completely and found out after, well, it's really hard to develop something in after the fact, and it's really hard to message it in after the fact. And that would have taken me, 10 minutes of having 5 people in a room or a webinar to ask them. So I completely wasted a lot of my time not writing down what does she do every day? What would she care about? And it turned out, fundamentally, if you didn't have recipes, they might not want to pay for it. And so it's something I could have done, looking back, it's something that was, a 10-minute exercise that I hadn't done properly. And so I think understanding what that person's job is or what they need to accomplish is so simple to do and so quick, don't miss that step off. I don't know if that was a great example, recipes.
Perfect.
But now I've told everyone that I don't cook very much. I'm letting all my secrets out. So then you could put in, now you add your post-it notes into your model. And remember I told you in the beginning, so I'm only doing consumer for mine. I have a multi-sided model, which means I sign up moms or consumers. In my case, it's Gen X. We do sign the other ones up as well. But we have what's called a suggestion engine where we can suggest things that are helpful to somebody before they would think of them. And corporations support us by paying for that, or they pay for a license for the consumer. And so my 2 customer segments are corporates for sponsorships and consumers. And so this looks like they're a silo, but every piece as you fill in your customer segment on here, every piece should sign somewhere else. So if you have 2 customers on here, you're going to get revenue from them here. You understand? If you've got 2 customers there, you've got to have a value proposition for them here. So as you add things into here, there have to be pieces that are the other pieces of the puzzle. So even though I'm building it this way, I did it because we only had 45 minutes to an hour, and this will probably take 10 to 15 minutes and we'll be done. And then that's the end of my session. But don't be fooled that I'm sticking post-it notes on without thinking about the other things. It's just there's not enough time to do this, in that kind of process way tonight. So I hope that's okay. At least I couldn't work out a way to do it.
You talking about that, when I was looking at this a couple of months ago when we first saw all of this, I guess when we started the program, the thing that struck me when I started doing it was it's laid out in a way that makes it sort of difficult to track that linear nature of,
right.
Customer, value proposition, revenue, like kind of a linear chain, right?
Right.
So it's kind of, I get why they laid it out this way, but it's kind of like not necessarily intuitive.
Right. I think that's why people get confused, and that's why I was trying to say, try and think about this,
right?
Because this makes it look like it's not. So, but yeah, I think that is one of the confusing pieces about this. But I didn't find a way to make it any easier.
It's like learning a language, right? You just kind of have to accept the fact it sounds different, it writes different.
And I tried different things, like I tried using different color post-it notes. I don't know if it
I did that on my board today.
Did you?
I don't know if it didn't do anything for me. I don't know.
I just ended up with kind of all kind of colors that looked like a non-informational rainbow. But yeah, no, I agree. That is a difficult piece of this. But generally, it's once you start to put one in, the others should flow around, and then you can move to the next one. But I would say, as a sanity check, always make sure there's some flow in there when you do this.
But also going through this, just a couple. We've been stressing a lot about MVP.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I built an MVP.
Right. Did this help with that, or?
I'm trying to think. I would say it helped me. So it did help me, but I think I didn't understand or do it sufficiently to do my MVP properly. So I learned a lot via my MVP that looking back, I think I could have learned before I did the MVP. and I think I could have done a mini MVP, like not build a product. I think I could have done much more of this from a website and from pretending I had a product before I invested in the MVP. But I think it's chicken and egg. My MVP got me my traction and things. But I feel like if I'd spent more, and it's not more time like if I'd spent 2 years instead of a year, I would have been better. I mean, if I'd have said I'm really going to evaluate each piece, I'm going to do it fast and quickly, I'm not going to procrastinate about everything, I think I would have been further along with my MVP than I was. So I think it helped me, but I don't think I leveraged it as much as I could have. I don't think I leveraged the lean startup methodologies as much as I could have either. I think there's a lot more things now that I understand that I could have done, but I've learned them with hindsight, which is why I said I would happily share every pin I've been through so nobody has the same sleepless nights that I did. So put in your customer segments, even if you only do one, and even if you don't know exactly who your customer segment is, write something down. My lessons learned is even if you do something and it's not perfect, it's so much easier to edit afterwards from something that's imperfect to try and be right first time, because you just never will be. Get something down, get your model, and then start to validate it. So did everybody get a customer segment?
So for this phase, would you rather pick one and follow it through and
I
iterate?
would. I would pick one and follow it through.
Brainstorming all the
because otherwise it's just too complicated. It's even too complicated to validate. Pick the simplest one, and I'm sure if there is official lecturers lecturing on this topic, they would say, think about this and do this. I think about the first thing that comes in your brain that's common sense, document it down, and then continue to see if that makes sense or not. So who were your customer segments when you did yours?
We have, when we did it, our product is for filling open shifts, and we were targeting hospitals and registered nurses.
Yeah.
So our customer is, the one that we picked is schedulers who do the registered nurses who do the scheduling.
Okay.
So the schedulers
that actually have to do the work.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And a couple of last week actually, Chris Sarah mentioned that when you do it's a B2B2C model.
Yeah, it's my model. Yeah.
And he said that if it's a B2B, then there are 3 customers for you:
right.
the user, the IT, and the finance.
Right.
So do we do it that way as well?
So I think I'm not a super expert in a B2B, but yeah, I would, because I think selling, you have to pitch, you have to understand the value proposition to all. When I sell into a corporation, I have to be able to sell to the person that might want the tool. Generally, their chief marketing officer for me, and then generally their CIO or their CTO. So yeah, I would put each 3 down. I did consumer for this, but yeah, I would. Mm-hmm. And I would think about all of them. But for the time we have tonight, I don't know if you want to pick one that's kind of like who you think would own the budget and work backwards through that, because I think then you would have a lot of value propositions and segments. It might be easier to say, okay, who actually would have to sign off on this, and then maybe work backwards from them, just because the time's so finite this evening.
So I was thinking the ones who are actually going to do the work, because that's their pain. The finance people might not feel the pain, but when we give them the value proposition, they'll say, oh, yeah, we can save money here.
Right. Or maybe the CTO, you can pick any one of those, but just, because sometimes it might be their CTO that would be making the buying decision for you. But just we have such a finite time tonight, I would probably just pick one and be most simple, but you're right, I think you have to think about all of them.
I would say for tonight, let's pick one, and then you guys it out
after in their exercise,
yeah. When you actually present it.
And so we've done the customer segments. Does everyone not have a customer segment? Anyone not have one? I'm going to keep going. Ooh. So value proposition. This was the one that said made me want to stick a pen in my eye. It was so difficult to articulate. You have no idea how hard it is to pick a few words that articulates value to somebody. It seems like the easiest thing. Do you know what we did in the end? You won't even believe this. We had a workshop where we got everybody in the room, and then we wrote the 20 words that articulate the value for us, and then we looked at the different wording and kind of struck them off into different sentences. And it took us 2 days in a workshop to actually come up with what the real value proposition was and what the wording and how to structure it. And then we used that on our site for A/B testing. But it was even the people in the room that worked with it every day, we all had different views about what words meant different things. I think this is such a key component. I guess that's why it's in the middle. I didn't design the canvas. But I want you to remember one thing when you think about this. It's what drives profitability, not necessarily the value proposition for the mom. So let me show you on mine what I'm talking about. So, can you see this? I'm pointing all over the place. So this one, the two that I have, from my direct-to-consumer, the value proposition or the offer is we save time and give peace of mind with one secure place to organize and connect your family. That drives revenue for me. And then the other one is the network effect, that we connect consumers with sponsors. That drives revenue for me. So these are value propositions that drive revenue. It's not necessarily the wording that you might use to the mom, like, I don't know what that could be, but it's not the value words you would use, it's the pieces that drive revenue. Remember, this is about building a business model to profitability, so just think about that as you go through each time you articulate this.
Canvas, what is a sponsor? What's your definition of a sponsor?
For me, a corporate sponsor is a corporation that would pay for something to be suggested or to sponsor at the cost of an application for a consumer. So it's a corporation. So there's a network effect there for me. So the more consumers I have, the more sponsors that want to come and work with my company. Okay. Now we're going to, did everyone get, you've only got a few seconds, you have to be like the bionic, did everybody, when I was younger, I loved a program called The $6 Million Man. Does everybody know this? Like the Bionic Man? My son came home from school talking about it. I'm like, kids didn't have to buy these DVDs. So tonight you all have to be like the Bionic Man. And put your post-it notes down. So did everyone get your value proposition? I'll give you a couple of minutes. You don't have to be too bionic. He told me there was a bionic woman and a bionic dog too, my son. Everybody done with their value prop?
Are we going to put these up or should I keep doing it?
You could put them on your section if it makes it easier for you, but if it's easier to just put them down and then put them on at the end, that's okay too. But for me, it's more about you, and you have the value, and
you guys can work at the boards too if you want. The presentation's going on, it's easier.
I have 4 boys under 11. You can't distract me from anything. Okay, right, now we're going to do channels. So these are the processes or the channels that connect you with your customers. And so in Aboutone, I have direct channels and I have indirect. My direct channels are search engine optimization. I have my website. I have a sales force. We do PR. We do events. And indirect, the one that drives the most revenue for me, are through partners. So those are my channels. So think about your distribution channels. How will you get to your customers?
Also, how you support them, maybe?
I think maybe when you do the next level of validation, but for this, more just what are they and how would you go after them? Yeah. I mean, I guess if there's a cost, it would go in the cost structure and how you support that, or if you need resources for them, it would go in there.
God, I would love to take that flight with you. I have so many questions for you. You get there, you need another flight to go to the sanitarium. I'll drive you crazy.
Okay, I'm going to wait for everybody to catch your channels. We only have 4 more to do when we finish the whole workshop. Can you believe that? Isn't that incredible? Do you have a business model, a business plan?
When you partner, do you have to partner, or what's the specifically who I'm partnering with, or just?
No, I would just put here partners, and then when you get to your partner network, you might want to add more details and to-dos on the top left-hand side. You might want to add more into there. But your channel, if you have partners, your channel of a partner, if they're key partners, you need to put it in your channel if that's going to how you're going to get to market. Okay. Because you need to test not only the partner, but you need to validate, is this a correct type of channel? Yeah, if that makes sense. Okay, are we ready? You done? Mm-hmm. You are bionic, you two. I think you've done it before. You're going so fast. Are you done? Can we start on customer relationships? At the back? You good? So customer relationships. This, for me, was way more important than I understood. So this is how you retain and grow your customers. And this was a lessons learned for me in how important trust was and how important for Gen X it was to have live chat and support and a concierge service. And once I'd given that kind of customized support, the customers were locked in, because once they put their information in the system, it's harder to leave that system. And so I'm going so fast in my PowerPoint. The customer relationships I have were a lock-in type, where we provide a personal service that they want to stay with us and their information's locked in and they trust us. So trust was really key for us. Maybe I should call it trust kind of lock-in. The standard term's lock-in, but there's more to it than that. And then the other piece of the customer relationship for me that was really important was that they cared enough about us and that they would share with other customers. So we had this viral model at a zero cost of acquisition. So you think about, is your relationship a high touch relationship? You have to spend a lot of time with just a few customers. Is it high volume that's just a live chat? What kind of relationship do you need to have with your customer? And I think I didn't think about this properly at first. I didn't put enough investment into the type of relationship that my audience wanted to have. And Millennial didn't want to talk to anyone, and Gen X wanted to have that more intimate relationship. So just think, because there's a cost associated with that. If you have a live chat, you have somebody that runs it, you have to have a support person. So think about the type of relationship you have to keep, to retain and cross-sell and upsell and keep moving with that partner, customer.
I take it the sequence you're doing is important, right? In a way.
I did it in this sequence. This is how I was taught, and it makes. If I had longer, I would probably do the cycle for each one. Does that make sense? So if I had 3 days to do this, I would probably work my way through a process for each one. Whereas when I sat down in 45 minutes with all different companies, I couldn't work out how to consolidate to have enough time. So I would probably do it a little bit. I would probably say, okay, here's my my corporate sponsor, they bring in this type of revenue, they need this value proposition. You know, I would do a kind of a cyclical, I would do like a process. But when I looked at the time that we had to try and get to the first pass done, it would probably have taken about half a day. So
this works very nicely.
It gets, well, in my view, is it gets the first pass there. You can always take these off and make sure each one's in a cycle afterwards. Because the process piece of this, I think, is really important to understand.
Right.
So it's probably not the best way, but it is for the finite time that we have. Okay, I want to stop everybody. I want to do now my favorite one. Cash is king. If there's something that I don't sleep about at night as an entrepreneur, it is cash. Nothing else. Nothing else do I have nightmares about. Cash. Cash is king. So this is my favorite one, revenue. So it could be, I can't remember where your revenue would come from for your different models. It could be asset sales, it could be rental fees, subscription. I have sponsorships, I have subscriptions, licensing fees, advertising could be a viable channel. It wasn't for me, but it's a very viable channel for many people.
How do you test something like that?
So if I was going back in time to test it, I think it's a good question. If I was going back in time, should I tell you what? I would put a site together and I would have people sign up, and then I would follow up with a questionnaire that probably has 2 or 3 questions in, and then I would make up a price. Like, we're going to have this calendar that files itself, that has all these bells and whistles, and here's a video. I would probably spend $2,000, $3,000 on a really cute video. And then I would put in the questionnaire, the price for this app will be $100, knowing there's no way anyone would pay $100 for this. And when they come back, because it's such a ridiculously high price, they'll tell you, are you nuts? I'd never pay $100, but I would pay 10 or I'd pay 20. And in my experience, I wish I'd done that right at the beginning, because they would be telling me then what their maximum price, what they really would pay. Whereas what we did is we said, what would you pay for this? So then they're all like, if we tell her 20, she's going to charge 20, and we only really want to pay 5. So there's a lot of kind of mental games. I would just pick like a ridiculously high price, and then in their emotional, then they'll tell you what their highest price would be.
I would do a clickable thing.
I would do, exactly. I would do an autoresponder. So I would have a double opt-in or an autoresponder that just goes out with 3 questions in, and that's all they have to answer in the email. So exactly how I would do it.
Thank you for
put a little tiny link to a questionnaire, put the 3 questions in the email. And then for corporations it's different. That's, you really have to go and do a pitch and see if people sign the letter of intent. So I think if I was selling into corporations again, I would probably say you have to sign a letter of intent for this particular price, because even though it doesn't really contractually mean anything, mentally they've had to go through that process of, would I really pay her for this? So for consumers, I would make the price too high. For corporations, I would make them sign a letter of intent.
Right, but how do you go about getting a price for corporate?
I think it's just research and asking them. Some of the things that I did for corporations is I went to people that I knew wouldn't buy from me, but that might mentor me, and I asked them, what's your budget for this? What would you really pay for this? So somebody I'm not going to sell to. And I did the same thing with investors that I knew wouldn't invest in me, and I said, please tell me what words you would use on these PowerPoints, because I'm using the wrong words. And then when they gave me their words, and then when I used them afterwards, then I was very successful. Okay. But sometimes it's just about using the right words, and sometimes it's about understanding their budgets. So I would ask somebody in a similar company, and generally most people will tell you what their budget is or what they would plan if they're not going to buy from you or it doesn't compete. Okay. Something like that. So I had lots of kind of one-on-one sessions, and then lots of times I had to buy pie and coffee and tea and take people. So it's an inexpensive way of doing research.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so revenue streams. Does everybody put in their revenue streams? Mine are sponsor sales, conversions to paid, and affiliate revenue. And can you see I've got a little question mark over affiliate revenue? So while we've had that working, it's not bringing in the volumes that we need, so I need to do more validation around that model. So it's really quick to see which pieces are not fully validated. For me, I've validated the question mark's kind of a little misleading because I've done some validation. But I wanted to show you which areas are not fully validated in my mind yet, so it's fast to see. It doesn't look very pretty. I think my marketing person would cry if she saw my design and my little check marks and my black question mark. But at least it stands out.
Do you find that the way that things now are evolving so fast is something you might have a check mark for now in, like, say, 18 months, unless you constantly stayed on it, it would become new again, right?
I would say probably just weeks in how fast our development team deploy and we test. So generally we validate in a few weeks. And I don't always come back to this model and reevaluate. I'll often work back into my financial model that we built out and move it into there, and then do this every so often that we need to think about things.
Did you build your financial model out of this? Did you build it
I
out
built
of
my
this?
my first financial model was out of the. I mean, there is more in it because you have to have more of a P&L kind of model and a cash flow. But the baselines for this, my first models, I was making billions of dollars. I was so wealthy in my mind. But once you go through this and you can start to attribute the right prices and the right lines, and that's the one I built from. And then Golden Seed sat down with me with somebody and taught me how to model it properly. And when you take this and then the model that you've built from this and then the real modeling, you completely understand what you have to do for your next steps and your action plan.
What model do you use to manage the business day to day, to communicate it with Golden Seed?
We do a monthly report that just gives a status update that shows every month what the different status is, and it has all the metrics in that we use for a business. So behind my model is, on the front of my model is a list of metrics, and then how we're measuring against the metrics month over month, and then a financial model, and then we have a status report each month that says, this is what we're doing on tech, this is what we're doing on customer, this is our sales plan, and things like that. But they're not all in one model. So Salesforce is our sales pipeline. So there's various models that different people in the company use, and then we have somebody on our team that pulls it into one place every month. But we, just so you understand, we track our metrics daily. So every single morning we have an email that goes out that tracks every single metric that's important to our company. And I think it's important to understand what those metrics are.
Do you react to them daily?
I react to them daily.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes.
The emotional thing I kind of get, but do you feel like
take action?
I mean, is there something is that overreacting, or is it?
No, I don't think so. I know when it's trending upwards, when it starts to trend down, I know we have to do something about it. It's pretty easy to see when you look at the model and you understand your full picture, where you need to put more effort in and where you need to move your time to. And sometimes it's a struggle, especially if you're fundraising, which is like a full-time job.
Right, okay.
Where do you focus on what you need to in your business, or do you raise your capital for your company?
It's hard for me to get out of what would be to you your SAP mindset and get into. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was very blessed in SAP. So I worked for all the teams that had startups within a large company.
Right.
So I did the first .com, the first cloud, and so that company, I would never have left there if this didn't take off. I loved it, but the learning that they gave me with the buffer behind, and the people that I could emulate and see how they worked and what they did, they were all brilliant. The lessons I got from that company were incredible. I don't think I could have done this if I hadn't had their lessons learned.
What I was talking about is SAP, they don't react on one day's metrics. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we did in our team.
Right.
Yeah, we had both of them were a startup team, so we did. Not always. Usually ours was every Friday, so not necessarily every day. Depends, where you were in your focus. But generally, the last team I was on was every Friday. So we did react every Friday, and we did a board status report every Friday as well. So weekly, and our traction was weekly. The board member responsible for our area had a, what do you call it, that sits on a piano that goes like this?
Oh, the metronome.
Yeah, he had one of those. It's like, this is how you work now. This is how you should work. When it's a cloud business, it goes like this. I was like, oh, okay. So he moved everything from these kind of quarterly reports into this weekly reporting. I was like, oh, okay then. But so it's really interesting to move to a cloud mindset from a large corporate sales. Okay, we all done with our revenue streams. My favorite piece.
Conversion is your because you are a premium model. It's revenue. It's
conversion to paid. So I have a paid model for my consumers. So this is conversion to paid from a free model.
So it's a subscription, in other words.
Subscription, yeah. And, that's a good question because I should have written subscription conversions on there. I think that's a really good point.
And sponsor, can you tell me one more time? You did mention what sponsors are.
They pay to suggest information based on demographic, geographic, and psychographic information. So suggesting something to somebody, it's kind of like an anonymous campaign that you can track how somebody feels and where they are and what their demographic is as to whether they'll react to your campaigns. It means that your marketing can be, you can market to somebody something before they've thought about it, but based on where they are in their life.
It's a form of advertisement, right?
It's a little bit different than advertising. Yeah, it's more like a personalized advert or a contextual-based advert. So it gives corporations something that they've never had before to get into somebody's kind of live stream. Okay, does everyone have revenue? If you don't, we have to kind of stop because you'll never have a successful company then. Okay, key resources. These could be buildings. In my case, human resources are obviously critical. They can be tangible or intangible. So it can be a physical building, your people, financial resources. When I knew I had to have a platform, I knew I had to raise venture capital. It could be intellectual property. I have a patent pending. It could be your brand. I mentioned trust before. That takes a long time and it's expensive to build. Traffic, the number of consumers that you have. And think about only what's essential because that could be a big box in resources. And so from a resource perspective, my two resources are obviously my platform and my apps because that's what I sell. And consumer volumes are huge for me. So if you think about this kind of network effect where I have to connect consumers with sponsors to bring in my revenue, the volumes that I have of consumers is a critical resource for me. So it's important that my customers use my app every day. Okay.
Have you done some kind of gamification for that? Just people come
We
back?
do have some game mechanics. We have something called achievements. So the more organized you are, the more you earn.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's a really good question. It's very insightful to have that at this stage.
Yeah.
So we have a product that they need to use every day because it's a calendar.
Right.
And then we have game mechanics built in and we call it an achievements engine. It's very cool. Okay, key activities. Do we do key activities? No. So, key activities. There could be millions on here. These are the things that you need to excel at. These are the things you need to be really, really, really good at. Otherwise, your business would fail. So, identify ones that would make or break your business model. So shall I show you mine? Because sometimes it's easier if there's a real example. So key activities for me are viral marketing. I have to achieve a low cost of acquisition, which means I have to have people invite people into my applications. Managing my platform. Obviously, if my platform goes down, I have nothing to work with. And a big key lessons learned for me was the user experience of my system. We worked without a user experience developer for a long time. And for consumers, that's not a good idea. So those are the key activities: managing the platform, viral marketing, and the user experience development, and the interface. So the platform could be brilliant, but if the experience is not good, it doesn't drive the consumer volume. So those are my key activities. Is it helpful to see what mine are?
Yes.
Oh, it is? I couldn't decide if it was going to take too much time to add in mine as well.
Otherwise, it can be a little too abstract.
Right.
And then you get these concrete things that you need to do every day. It's much better.
Did you use Amazon Web Services?
I did. Originally, I'll talk about that in a second. Originally, I used Ruby on Rails and Amazon, but now I'm on Microsoft Azure and .NET, and I'll talk about why, if anybody's interested, why I made that move and what I did and what it cost me. And I actually asked somebody from Microsoft to come because I'd had such a good experience. And then because I wasn't sure how many people would be here or what happened with the traffic, I said, it's such a long way, I can give you his contact. But I had a really good experience with them. And so I asked him to come and talk about his current programs because I don't know what they are. So I can ask him to talk about that again if you want.
Is that the same as the Azure platform? Or is that
Azure, yeah.
Oh.
That's the platform that I'm on.
So you moved because of cost benefit?
No, I moved because I knew I needed to sell into corporations, and when I did my validation, the feedback that I got was it needed to be infinitely scalable, globally compliant. It needs to be a technology that they recognized and could support in-house. And we looked across all the bigger platforms that were available then, and we looked at the cost piece of it, but it wasn't necessarily because it was cheaper, although the BizFac program was so cost effective for us, it was kind of a no-brainer, but that wasn't why I made the decision. And actually, technology, there's a lot behind this, but given where we were and the kind of constraints that we had as a business, we took the Ruby on Rails developers to Microsoft and we did an analysis together, and they said for our business, even though they would lose their jobs, they felt like it was a better technology for what we needed to sell. Some of our customers are military. There was a lot more to that than a cost decision. But I think it's a really good question because it's a difficult decision to make as an entrepreneur.
But yours is a cloud-based system, so how does it even matter for the CIOs or technical implementation, whether to use Ruby or
because if they're licensing their own platforms, there's APIs that they need to match, and some of them wanting to understand what happens if they took it in-house. So we built a system, exactly. So if I can't say the name of the company, but say I'm a big company and I might want to take this kind of cloud platform into my own infrastructure. So that was something that was very important to them. But I think it's a really good question because it's such a difficult decision to make in advance without having sat with some entrepreneurs that have gone through these decisions and why. So what were we just doing then? Oh, key partners. No, we were doing
key activities.
Key activities, that's right. Now I've lost my thought process. Okay, so now we'll do key partners. Everyone ready? Yep, key partners. So this is the network of partners and suppliers that help make your business more. Oh, yeah, you have a question?
Are partners and customers are the same?
They can be, yes. They can be the same. And in fact, I have some partners and customers that are the same. So yeah, they can be. And in fact, some of your strategic partners, when they become customers, can make or break your company. So yeah, I think that's a good question too.
It's vice versa?
I think,
could become
yeah, I think they could, yeah.
key partners.
Yeah, I think so. So you could have alliances with non-competitors. I contacted people that I thought were my competitors to ask them to work with me, and I learned a lot just doing that. And some of the people that I thought would compete with me actually ended up being good partners for me. So think about customers, think about vendors, think about competitors in there. And then I think for mine, it's important for you to understand. So there's a couple of things that I do think that are lessons learned for me that you might not think about. So in my partner network, I have Microsoft. So they have this kind of brilliant BizFat program that you can go in that helps you with the cost. But what I didn't expect, and I think that I didn't understand early enough, is these partnerships can be worth not capital because they're taking equity, but they can be worth, say, high amounts of cash. So Microsoft can come with a marketing program that could be worth $500,000 if it's executed properly. They're not my customer, but they're a strategic partner. So I was accepted into Dell Founders Club because everyone knows Dell has a Founders Club. They pick 30 entrepreneurs to expedite their growth, and they give you a group of mentors. So one of my mentors was a guy called Richard Garriott. Does anybody know this guy? He was called. So we went. I don't know if we've got a lot of time, but we went for dinner, and I sat next to somebody, and he said, "Oh, my name is Richard Garriott." So I thought, okay, I don't know who he is. I'm not sure what to say. So I'm like, hello. And he said, my nickname or my pseudonym is Lord Britain. So does anybody know this? I thought, is he being like sarcastic about my accent? I'm like, okay. And I thought, I still don't know who he is. So he said, I invented like a really famous game called Doom. Does anybody know this game? Or okay. So, and you know, I'm a very famous game mechanics person, and you know, I've done all these things. And then it turns out when he did his presentation, he is one of the first investors in space. SpaceX, this kind of space companies. He was the first consumer to fly into space and live in space for 2 weeks. And what he made me realize in these entrepreneur sessions is, I think my biggest failure in life could be just not to aim high enough. So he decided, when he was 15, I want to go to space. Well, who decides they want to go to space? And he couldn't go to space because he wore glasses. So he said, well, you're not going to tell me whether I can go to space because I wear glasses. I will build my own space company. And so that's what he did. And then he went to space, and there's a movie about him. It's really interesting. But anyway, that's kind of a round story. But they have this Founders Club, and then via that Founders Club, we received a contract to OEM on all the Dell and Windows 8 machines. So these partners can be, you go in there thinking, well, I'm going to be a Bismarck company. They might come up to you and say, let's do a case study on you and PR and press, and let's make a video about you. And that might bring in marketing spend that's $500,000 that you could never, ever, ever anticipated. So don't turn away these partnerships. And half of the battle is turning up. I think as an entrepreneur, it's easy to stay in your room and key and work. And it's really hard, I think, to go networking and go to these places, especially on your own, and especially as a woman. It's like dating in high school. It brings me out in hot sweats. I hate going up to people saying, hello, I'm Joanne. And so, but half the battle is turning up and being seen and turning up and going and keep going back. And then they recognize you and they start to bring these opportunities to you. However uncomfortable it is, you need to force yourself to go out there and do it, which is why I wanted you to do this here and not in your office, because the next phase is to go out and do this. And I think that's the most, making yourself go and do that and talk to a customer and talk to a partner and find a model, it's really hard to do. It's uncomfortable to cold call someone and say, hello, I'm Joanne. But you have to do it. And so that's why I wanted to get this piece done, because in my mind, this is something that you should do in an hour. The hard piece is going and doing that next step. So I have Microsoft Azure, love them. If anyone wants any information on them, I can pass that. Dell Founders Club, love them. I have marketing partners that I go to market with that I just bring in thousands of customers for me per day. And then we have a blogger community that blogs about us as well. Super, super important. Blogger, all the different local blogger events. Those people are invaluable to me in my marketing process, my link back to my SEO. Okay, last one, my enemy of revenue, the cost structure. So this describes all the costs that you have in your model. I don't know if anyone's building their Excel. Please try and do this. It's really important that you have some kind of numbers and then your revenue and your costs. Even if you don't do it now, please try and do it before you go off and start to validate your model, so you've got something that says, is this a viable business? You could have fixed costs. Again, this is a whole other lesson. You could have rent. You can have variable costs. I'll go through mine quickly. So I have fixed tech hosting, security. Security is a huge cost for me in my company. Both kind of direct and indirect costs to have the kinds of levels of security and infrastructure and data management that we have on top of the secure environment we're in. The developers are a cost for us, and then variable costs would be marketing and events. As we ramp up marketing, our consumers go up, but there's a cost. If we go to an event, the costs go up and our users go up. So those are the kinds of ones. And I actually got my model out when I did this, my P&L every month, and I looked really, where are my costs? These really where my costs are. So. Okay. Did everybody do that? Who does not have a filled-in model? Oh, we're still the Bionic Boys in the corner. Don't have their costs on yet. So please, even if you don't do it here, before you go out and validate, please put together some kind of cost model, revenue model, and put some kind of numbers in to see what your market would be and if this is viable. It was such an important lesson for me. Don't make that mistake to not do this before you go out. So who still has something to? Have you done your costs? Yeah, have you done your costs?
When you think about costs, so say I know what our hosting costs and that kind of, you think about it monthly, annually,
We do ours monthly and then quarterly. So we do monthly a year out and then quarterly after that. And then we plan by exact line item, kind of by groups, OPEX, marketing, salaries. We have a model, kind of like an integrated Excel model that has salaries on one that then feeds a higher level summary model, and then the top sheet we have a kind of like metrics that show not just the financial piece but the management accounting metrics that come out of that as well. Right, is everybody done? You're finished! You are done! Guys, you've done your first pass at your business model. Wasn't that easy? And you might have a lot of validation to do, but now you can go out and validate your model and see how viable it is. And that to me is the harder piece. I really wanted you to get this done. But now I'm going to do a check. So these are the questions that I was asked against my model. And these are characteristics that good business models have. So now, should we do like a test and you have to put your hand up if you have a good method, like in school? Yes or no? So the first question is, does your model have switching costs for your customers? So my model, it's hard for my customers to switch because they've got all their data in there. It's harder for them to move it out. So if your model has switching costs, that's a good sign for sustainability for a good business model. Do you have switching costs? Good. Or did you have a question?
No. I
just do the hand raise.
So is that like churn?
No, switching costs would stop churn. So if it's high for a customer to leave your product, it means they would stay with you even if you're a little bit hard to use. It's hard to switch. The next one, the next checklist to see if you have a good model. Do you have recurring revenue? Or do you have to sell every sale separately? You have recurring revenue. Good. That's another check mark on a good business model. So far this room's doing really well. Next question, do you earn before you spend? Now this was learned painfully for me. So for every dollar that you spend, you have money coming in either before or as you spend it. And so the question here would be, if any capital was taken away and you only had the cash coming in to be sustainable, how would you do it? And your model has to think through that process. So I do now, but boy did it take me a long time to learn that. Much longer than if I'd spent more time on it at this stage. So if you earn before you spend, that's good for your business model. It doesn't have to be the be-all and end-all, but it's a good strategy to have.
Earlier you mentioned the idea of selling an annual subscription up front. Is that a good example, or are there other?
I think that's a great example. Or when you spend a marketing dollar, is your platform or your app built so that other revenue is going to come in either from advertising or sponsorships or some other methodology? Or do they pay monthly in advance before they start to use your app? You have a freemium model first. But before you spend any money to acquire them, are you sure, or do you know you're going to get that money back or make a profit from it? Isn't that a good question? And really sit and brainstorm. If you had no other way to do this, what would you do? And think laterally about it. It's surprising how many ways you can come up with if you think about this properly. There's lots of ways. Another good example. On Facebook, I'm always being followed and stalked around by a site called Zulily, I think it's called, like women's clothes and shoes and things. So I thought, I like this dress. I will order this dress. So online I go, and there's all these beautiful things. I thought, this is like Target, when you go in to buy some milk and you spend $500 and fill your trolley. So I'm clicking away and buying these things, and I paid for it. Then afterwards I found out you're pre-ordering. So they're not going to come in a week. It's going to take. So some of my stuff that was ordered for the summer took like 6 or 8 weeks to come. So the model is you get this brilliant discount, but you pay in advance before they're paying out to somebody for the products to be built and shipped to you. I mean, it's a brilliant model unless you're like me and you don't read what this really is. And you think, now I've missed the date for my beautiful dress that I ordered. So that's another example of this kind of model where they're thinking differently about their model for something.
Yeah, but they've annoyed you as a customer.
Maybe, but I still went back because their stuff is really cheap. It's really the stuff that I want. So I was annoyed, but it's good enough that it solved my pain point that it was low enough cost structure to get something that I wanted to buy. So we probably shouldn't video these things where I'm saying mean things about other companies.
Treating them as well as you say.
Great products. So the other one is, do you have a game-changing cost structure? So I don't think mine was difficult to look at for this, but are there things that you can do that bring your costs down? So we have a great cost of acquisition partners that we have to learn. So I have between 20 cents and $1 through specific partners, and I had to learn that. So that's kind of an example for my cost structure. I love what Microsoft do, and I think some of the other companies do it as well. We can have free for so long, so you could validate your model and see your sizes. That's really cool. So this next ones are really, so my team are texting me if things keep going. I keep getting lots of texts. But the next one that I really like that I hadn't thought about properly is, do others do the work for you? So do other people do the work for you in some way? So a great example of this, actually I can use my company, it's so great, is I have a platform that developers can develop on, and then they can sell their apps and they just license from my platform. So they are doing my marketing, they're building on my platform, they're telling consumers they're powered by Aboutone. Apple has developers developing apps for them, and it makes it really hard for competitors to come in, even if they have a lot of money, because you're building that landscape of people that can develop for you. So that's one example. Others could be affiliate programs, like we have bloggers and professional organizers that recommend Aboutone and earn affiliate revenue from us. That's another one that might be an interesting, do they do the work for you? Right, next question, is it scalable? So can you scale very, very quickly to the numbers that you need to scale at? This was important for me for the decision. Could I go from 1 to 10 million? So if I closed a deal with a massive corporation, could I scale quickly to support that? And is your model scalable? Not just mine was a technology scale, but how many how many people? If you've got a services model, that's really hard to scale because you need to hire a lot of people, and hiring talent is just incredibly difficult, and it can be incredibly expensive and incredibly timely. And then the last question, am I going too fast? I can see people typing. Are you okay?
Yep.
The last question is, what protection do you have from your competitors? So it could be IP, so I have a patent pending. I nearly got my attorney arrested because we went to the patent office in Washington, and I took loads of pictures of me under the patent signs, and the guys came out with their guns and got my attorney and said, stop taking pictures, it's illegal. So don't take pictures in the patent office, it's a good tip. And then, so a good example of this is this network effect.
Your patent is on the process, right?
Now my patent is on my suggestion engine and the algorithms around the suggestions and how we manage the suggestion process. That's where my patent, and it's pending, it's not full.
But don't they say that algorithms is one such thing that is, patent is not work anything?
It's a process.
Change,
it's a process pattern that has algorithms within the different steps that we've got.
so if I change the algorithm, then I don't.
It doesn't
follow
matter for my pattern. Yeah, it's a business
So if
process
I have
pattern.
my own algorithm doing the same suggestion point, then
Yeah, I think it's my understanding is it's a process pattern that takes you through different steps, and the algorithms that are in there are like a piece within that particular step. That's how I understand. Although reading and writing my pattern was like learning another language. It was incredibly difficult to do. And would I do it again? Right. I think that is exactly how I felt. It made me. It was an interesting learning experience.
Along those lines, doesn't the amount, I understand patents are significant money, whatever, $20,000, $30,000 to
It's
start.
more than that, I would say.
And then you need a policing force to make sure that nobody's infringing on your patent, right?
Yeah, so we probably could never afford to do that, but having the IP rights, if you think about an acquisition, some of the bigger companies that would acquire me could enforce that. So if you think about the types of companies that would acquire in my space, whether it's Verizon, Samsung,
right.
they could enforce a patent, so then it does have a lot of value. It can definitely increase the value of your company. So it depends how much effort you want to put into getting it and the process behind it. You made me smile with your head movement then. So what protection do you have from your competitors? There's all kinds of ways for competitors. It doesn't have to be IP and a patent. It could just be like this network effect. The more consumers that you have, the more sponsors that you have. If you've got a platform, it takes years to build. There's IP in there. There's lots of different ways to protect against your competitors. And again, remember what I said at the beginning? If I'd have stopped for how many competitors were there, I would just never be here right now. So you just watch them and be aware of them, but don't be obsessed by them. And where you can, try and analyze and try and talk to them and try and understand them. I think it's very important. So you finish your model. I'm so proud of you for doing it in an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes. There's a couple of things I wanted you to do for me, if you don't mind. The first one is, if you are building a mini app or an app around family, please talk to me and see if you can license my platform. We're going to take 2 companies to CES with us, and they'll get all the marketing and branding and press that we get for that. And the apps could be done in a hackathon in a weekend if you wanted to build them on our platform. Everything's ready down to the REST API. Or if you know other people that want to build, it would be great marketing for them, and I'd love to do something with people in Philadelphia, because clearly I got my funding from here, and it's a good way for me to give back. And then the second one, can you put some tweets out? I don't know who Twitters. Can you say thank you to Golden Seeds? Without them, I wouldn't be able to be here to teach you. And the woman that did my modeling, that helped me understand all this, was a woman called Carol Curley, and she pushed me through this like pushing a boulder up a big high mountain, 24/7 for 2 weeks. And so if you can, I don't mind what you tweet, but please do something nice to either of those people. I would appreciate that. And so if you know people that are looking to build any kind of mini apps to do with family, let me know as well. I'd love to do something and get the press for people back in this area. And the mini apps are so quick to build. If you're a good iOS developer or Android or Windows 8 developer, it's something you could probably do in a weekend or a week or a couple of weeks. I'll bring this up in a second. So the last piece is the exercise. So I am in Walnut Street Labs. I don't know if anybody knows. Walnut Street Labs is like an office sharing space, and they invest in companies where you work you stay and keep your job in a corporation, and then they help build that company out. So it's a working space. Every Tuesday they do presentations and education, and they're brilliant. I've seen some really good presentations there. And what they are doing now is something called office hours. And so I spoke to their founder and asked him, I'm going to have these people. I didn't even know if we could do this, to be honest, in the time we've done it. It's so fast. And so what I said to him is, generally this would be, a week to do this kind of class, to put something together, and then you've got your exercise for a few weeks. how can we help them do this that doesn't take my capacity? So he runs something called office hours. Their core competence is looking at business models and making an assessment on whether they'll invest in them and then adapting those business models. That's their core competence. And so he is offered to do what they call office hours, where if you want to, we can provide the email addresses or the phone number, and you can set up times that are experts not just in business modeling but in the type of business model that you need as a company, so your industry or your segment or your sub-segment, and you can call them or you can go in and sit with them and they'll do this for free. And so they should be able to help you in the next few weeks clean up what we've got here, because I don't have time to look at all of them, but to clean up and help you validate them and give you some of the contacts and the steps that you need. You don't have to take it, it's optional. But I think it's always helpful to have somebody that's been there before and done this to go and sit with. So he's called Chris Dima, and I don't have his email on here, but I'm sure I could find it at the end and share it. Or we could email it out, and you just need to call him or email him and set a time of it. And that's what they're calling it, office hours.
So actually, Walnut Street Labs is setting up with Chester County
that's right.
Development Center.
Yeah.
They're setting up 4 hours, something like that. So I think
that's who it's through. Yeah. I love that group. I have all kinds of stories to tell you about that group as well. I'll tell you at the end.
Who was it, Chester?
Chester County Economic Development Center.
The woman that runs that is just phenomenal, Mary. Isn't she brilliant? So yeah, I'll tell you what she did for me in a few seconds if anybody wants to stay and listen, if you're interested. So the exercise itself, my advice is you heard my stories about talking to competitors, companies that have closed down. Find another successful company, look at their annual reports, Google them, track down their CEO and their strategy, and analyze what makes their model successful. Look at their financial models. You can learn a lot just by kind of sneaking around and looking at their reports and things and their blogs and what they produce, and then come back. So don't think about this until you've looked at a successful one, and then come back and reanalyze yours. So go back in and look, does this make sense? How do they make money? What makes them good? You could talk to people the way I did, or you could just do this online. Look at where the risky blocks are and highlight those in an area that you really need to go and validate, because it's the biggest risk for failure. And then my biggest request, and this is what took me a long time, and I think you can do it way faster, is go and talk to your customers. Talk to your customers, find out if they'll pay, try and get letters of understanding, anything that you can do to get customer feedback. And it's okay to ask people, what will you pay? Will you pay this? I tell you, when they have to get their credit card out or sign a letter, it's completely different. So laterally think, how can I get them to do something to sign for this? Even if it's an early customer, they might not give a credit card, but they might sign something to say, yes, I'll be your early elite advisory board customer. That's what we did with some of our consumers. But you must validate this, and it means you have to go outside your room and you have to go and meet people and talk to people, and it's so much harder than you think, especially, I don't look quiet tonight, but I'm quite quiet, especially if that's a hard thing for you to do. It's really important to get to that profitability and the revenue as fast as you can. And that's the end of my presentation, so I'll go back to this. So does anybody have any other questions? I'm happy to share anything that I've learned, and there's so much more to this than what we've done in the last hour. Although I can't really read it, even with my glasses on, so you could have just kind of scribbled stuff and stuck it on there.
That would be cheating for us.
It would be. But you did so well to do it so quickly and put the thought process into it. Now you've got it, I think you can really move forward.
Does that mean also this is the type of thing you're actually looking for, or is that...
No, those are just examples. Anything to do with family, possessions, health, insurance, career, charity, anything around vehicle management. We have all kinds of APIs and data structures and things in there. And it's all finished, so you're only building UI. There's no data structure or data platforms, and it comes with a ton of free marketing. And CES will be a good event for us.
Sorry, what is CES?
Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. So my first deals I signed came from there, not because we had a booth, but because I was on a panel. So I was speaking on a panel, and when I came off the panel, the big corporation stood in a little queue, and I kept looking behind me thinking, is this for somebody else? And then they signed some deals, and the first big press that we got was there, but they were kind of mean to me. They said my UI was horrible, and I wanted to cry, but it was my first experience of launching a product, and what does it have to be like to get good tech press? So it was an interesting lesson to learn, but I learned it quickly and painfully.
One question, it's not related to any of this, but you're a 4 children mom, right? And how do you manage and what,
Do you know, I think that's probably one of the best questions, and I don't think it applies to just women. I think it applies to men that have children as well. I had to learn to balance. So there's a couple of things I had to learn that I didn't do well at first. And the first one is to balance my time, to give some time for me, because otherwise you would just work 24/7, because it's like having a 5th child. And if you're not healthy and you're not well in yourself, so you don't give yourself time to go to the gym. So now I set 20 minutes is for me every day. Nobody can talk to me. I pull faces and go, get out of the room for my kids, but it's my 20 minutes, even if it's 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. And the other thing I had to learn to do is let things go and only focus on what I think they'll remember. So if there is a mess in the room or the bathrooms need cleaning, they won't remember that, but they'll remember that I was a homeroom mom and I was there for the Valentine's party, and they'll remember that I sit down and do their homework with them every night. And so being a CEO, it's a lot of long hours and it's really hard, but you are the CEO. So if you want to go and be a homeroom mom for an hour, you can take that hour and go and be the homeroom mom because you've worked 5 million others. If you want to be the person that's there at 4 o'clock for their homework, you can't do it every day, but when you can do it, that's an important time. And the other thing that was hardest for me to do was mentally be there. And I don't know if this is a good description. So it doesn't matter if I turned my phone on or off. I had to mentally make an effort to say, the only thing that matters is what's in this space right now. It's not anything that I've done wrong in the past, because I can't control it. And if I'm thinking about the future, it's not the right thing to think about. It's not going to help anything. And so I had to learn, if something was going wrong somewhere else, I can't control it for that hour. So just not be present in the room. So if they are doing homework, you're present to help them. And then the other thing for me was to have a really good support network, so that my husband changed his job to have a different job so that he could be there in the morning and night. It didn't work out in the long term, but for the first few years it was hard. And then I have a nanny. I had her in SAP and I earned enough money that even though it didn't cover me, it covered her salary, so there was a consistent flow in my life for my children. And then my parents helped a lot as well. But those are the things that I had to learn that I wish I'd learned faster. I think it's a really good question.
Are you rushing out after this, or are you?
I am rushing. I have to get a flight at 4, so I am rushing out. And I only got back on Friday at 2 a.m., so I do have to rush out.
For ideas, or just should we tweet you or email you?
I would say try and use Chris's team first, because that's the support system I put in place.
For the vignettes?
For the office hours, to help you with anything you've got. For anything that's to do with my company or licensing my platform, you can email me, and I'll leave you my email address for that as well. If I don't respond, you have to keep sending it. I get a lot of emails, and it's hard. If I'm there, you'll get an answer. If I'm not, I might miss it. And people think I'm rude, and I'm not being rude. I just don't see it. And so you have to keep going and going and going and going, almost like you're stalking me. So I would say if you want to license an app, call me or email me. If it's questions about this, it's harder for me. If I'm honest, it'll be hard for me to find the time to help people, because I also do a mentor program with the All Fellowship, and there's some other things as well that I do. I'm trying to give back, but there's not a lot of time. So you can try me, and if I'm sat at my desk and it comes in and I can answer it quickly, and you put a concise header like PSL Bootcamp 5-minute question, and it's literally a 5-minute question, then I'll probably answer it. If it's some big thing that takes a lot of time that I'm skimming through and I can't answer it quickly, I probably would never get to it, if I'm honest. So I would word it properly, and I would put a title on that's obvious. girl that's at the back in pink boot camp, question, 5 minutes, something that makes it when I'm skimming down, I can do it for my iPhone when I'm in an airport or something like that.
Do you ever do all hours as well?
I do not. No, I just don't have time. I will one day, but not right now. But I'm happy to try and help. It's just more of a time constraint right now. And I've said in the past I'll help, and then I don't, and then I don't have time, or I miss the email, and then it gives you a bad press if you're not responding because you don't see it, and people just think you're not responding, then they are negative about you. So I'm trying to be careful how I manage that right now.
I'm just curious about your team now. How many people work with the bank?
I have 11 people now.
And where are you located?
Here in Utah, for many different reasons. My
Are you
development
in the
team
city
and my
of Philly,
CTO
or-
are Utah.
Are you in Philadelphia? Or?
I'm in the suburbs. I'm in Westchester, in Walnut Street Labs. And then my development team are in Utah. So we have a house office like Facebook that's really cool. It's like a house. We have a basement that our developers develop in, and then the second floor is a brainstorming and work area. And then we have some bedrooms that when we need to stay there, we stay there. And then here I'm in Walnut Street Labs just because it gives me so much access to investors and capital and PR. They bring all their press in, they meet everybody that's in Walnut Street Labs, they do presentations about what they're looking for. So just to be in an open, like an office sharing space like that, it is phenomenal for helping for things. I speak here at Benjamin's desk in Philadelphia. That's really cool. But I haven't been to any of the others, so I can't really comment on them. But I like the team at Benjamin's desk as well. Any other questions?
Utah seems like I'm sure there's reasons as to why you have a team in Utah. Any insights? Or?
Yeah, I hired a team in Utah because Philadelphia was really, I don't know if it's like that now, but at the time it's incredibly expensive to hire experienced talent in, for me, in architecture, which is fundamentally my IT, because they worked for such big companies and earned such big salaries. So it was more cost effective to look in Utah. And the difference that I found is the developers were much older, not disrespectfully, but they had a lot of life experience and corporate experience, and they were huge in families, huge. That region is big in managing your families and understanding the family space. Ancestry.com's there, Family Search is there. And so when I raised my capital, all of it was from here except one investor that's in Utah that I looked for, an investor in the kind of health space that had a big exit in the health space. But those are the reasons that I moved there. And for me, it was a really good idea to have East and West Coast, because the next level of investors would be kind of Menlo Park and Silicon Valley. So you need access to get there without having to live in Silicon Valley, which I couldn't afford. And then the East Coast has all the credit card companies, the pharma companies. I mean, it's a hub for prospects. But there's a lot of travel involved in that, and that's difficult to manage when you're in a startup environment as well. Although I did find out, shall I tell you a tip and trick? I did find out that if you have to travel and you're an entrepreneur and you email American Airlines, that they will fund your flights for you. Did you know this?
What?
Why did they do that?
I was invited to speak at an event that was like the top 20 companies for an exit or an acquisition. I can't remember what the event was now, but when I was there, American Airlines was there, and she's like, oh, we have this program for entrepreneurs. If you fly with us and join this business program, send a request in and we will cover your flight. So say for CES, I could put in a request and go, and they would cover the cost of the flights to go to CES. And they do these really cool things where you can be seated next to an entrepreneur on your flight. And so this is really interesting. And then they do press in the magazines and things. It's an entrepreneur program. And so for me, I couldn't use it because the flights, they weren't my flights. But on the flight this week, I learned that US Airways just merged with them. So now the Philadelphia hub with the flights I get is under that umbrella. So I thought, aha! That's really interesting. So that sounds like a really cool program that I don't know if it's still on, but I'm going to go and investigate and apply for that, because I think that would be invaluable for connections and contacts and meeting other people. And they open their connections the way Microsoft did for me to do introductions as well. So I don't remember what it's called, but I'm sure if you Google Entrepreneur American Airlines, their program would come up, which I think is But now I've told you all, you'll all apply, and I'll be last in the queue because I'm so busy, and you'll all get your flights, and I won't. I'm not sharing any more tips and tricks.
If I remember correctly, was it American Airlines or was it United?
No, it was American Airlines.
Think about it.
No, it was American Airlines.
I'm getting your way out for a little bit.
I'm just curious.
I'm like, no, you're wrong. Yes, it was United, everybody.
I'm just curious. Are you based here or are you based in Utah?
My head office is here, and most of my time I spent here, but we're hiring like a president, a chief revenue officer that will be in Utah, and then I'll spend less of my time there, and my CTO is there as well. But I have some amazing investors there. Like I said, they just sold a company called MediConnect last year for $400 million, and they integrated health, which was, of course, integrated health. You know, as your mom, your health records come from Walgreens, from Quest, from United Healthcare. And so I needed to find a company that had done this before and had a successful exit. And so I found a company called Reese Capital, and they're in Utah as well. So dependent on what I'm doing and the cycle I'm in, whether I'm fundraising or selling, is where I have to be geographically before I do that.
What's your normal work hours during a weekday?
So I work 7 days a week. It depends. Sometimes I get up at 4 or 5 or 6. Depends what I've got to do. And most days I probably work until 10 or 11. And then I take gaps at strategic times, especially if I'm with my children. Then I'll take gaps then, or I'll take a gap to go exercise or something like that. But it's 7 days a week, and I've been doing it for 4 years. And I would say I've had maybe 2 vacations or days where I was supposed to be off, and even then I would get things or questions on my cell phone. So I would say it's been a constant. So I think another reason that companies fail is because the entrepreneur gives up, because it's exhausting. And that's why I was saying you have to have that right team around you. Shall I tell you a story about my husband? So my husband's Austrian, so he speaks German, and I had this epiphany. I'm going to have this company, and we're going to do the startup. So one day I came downstairs, and my husband was sat with a beer, luckily, and I said, I have this brilliant idea. I am going to take all our savings. I'm going to leave SAP, have no health benefits. When I create this family organizer, and he couldn't answer back in English because he was so flabbergasted, and so he said in German, I think that's the most ridiculous idea, what are you thinking? And so then I pretended I didn't understand, and I was like, oh, thanks, great, let's go. So there's something to say, but I think he would, if I ran off a cliff, he would come and catch me, and you need a support system like that, and especially for me, because my family is not here. So you have to, so there's a couple of things I think you have to have. You have to have a support system, even if they don't believe in your idea, you have to have it. And because they believe in you, and you have to have one person that believes in you in your company. Just one person to write a check, one person to believe in you, one person to support you, and you've got that one person. So I think everyone in this room should think about how they can be that support person for somebody else, so they can go off on their kind of journey and believe in them, because it doesn't have to be cash, it's just having somebody to believe in you. And as you go through your journey, there's different people that join that journey on the way that believe in you for different things, and they're really important. And I think sometimes to keep going, you have to have that. So you have to look for those people that will be your rocks in times when it's really difficult, whether it's a good time or a bad time. They need to be there and be supportive, and even when everything's going wrong, yay, you're doing a great job.
I really like the way you said it, because when you said that you should all think about, I thought you were saying that, think about a person who can be that kind of person for you.
I think you should think how you can help somebody else, because it's something that somebody will come back and give that back to you. I think it's important.
So did you start it with the co-founder? Sometimes it's the co-founder.
That's a really good question. So I love the questions on teams, because I think they're the hardest questions, and I think they can make or break your company. So I started with 2 co-founders that are no longer co-founders. I have a different co-founder, and I'm still friends with my co-founders, but when they didn't leave their jobs to come and do this, when it was the right time, I was the only one that did. And so I think you have to be, one of my friends runs a company called The Muse in New York, and she had a lot of issues with her first company that went wrong because of all these kind of co-founder relationships and things. She talks about it a lot. And I think you really have to think, like when you found a company, you're a co-founder, it's like being married to them, except you can't divorce them. It's like you're investors. You're married, but you can't divorce them. And I think it's like going back to dating in high school. Like, you wouldn't get married on your first date, so why would you kind of co-found with somebody that you might just have met at work or is a random friend? And I think you need to spend a lot of time thinking about who your co-founders are, because you're going to go through some really hard times where you're crying on your bathroom floor with your bottle of wine for 2 hours. Are they going to be there to pick you up? Are they going to, when they have to leave their job, are they going to leave with you? So I was really burned by that, and I love my co-founders. I'm still friends with them. They still own some of my company, and I did everything right by them. But at the time, I was very hurt, and that hurt can be negative or be positive. And so I think the positive thing that came out for me is I have a co-founder now, but I worked with him for a long time before he could be a co-founder, so I kind of evaluated, well, would I marry this guy, or am I going to divorce him after a few weeks? And so I think co-founding with your friends, is a good idea? I don't know. I wouldn't hire family or friends ever. I've had so many catastrophes now, and it's so difficult it's so hurtful to come out of a relationship when it's friends or family. So I would never do that. It's my personal experience and my personal lessons learned. And I think your co-founder, if you've worked with them for years and years and years and years, maybe that's a good fit. But I think you have to be really careful, because I think your employees and your founders can make or break a company, and people can be difficult to work with, and they're super unpredictable. So you're going along thinking everything's fine, and actually doing things in the background that you have no idea about.
So how did you work that out? Then you say that, I want you to be my co-founder, but I want to, test you for.
I didn't tell him I wanted him to be a co-founder. I employed him as a very senior role, and then I watched him and worked with him for a long time. And then in a really, really, really difficult period, incredibly difficult, I asked him if he would step up to be a co-founder, and he did, but I'd watched him for a year first. So I didn't tell him about being a co-founder until I decided. And then, not really a test, but a good signal was when I asked him when it wasn't a good time. It's always good to be a co-founder when everything's going well. When it's going wrong and somebody wants to step up and be that person, that's another good time.
So he was your employee though, right?
Yeah. But those are everything's different, and everybody's working relationship's different. Those are just my lessons learned on what I would or wouldn't do again. I definitely wouldn't hire family members together again, and I wouldn't hire friends or family to be my founders. I think it's a business relationship, and it needs to stay that way. But that's my lessons learned. Any other questions?
Maybe we should let her go.
Yeah. Did you do all of the things with me?
Thank you.